Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wellsome, the podcast where wellness meets self development. I am Vicky, and together in each episode, I'm going to guide you through real conversations about health and personal growth. So, in today's podcast, I have the pleasure to interview Suchi.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
Lovely to meet you. Lovely to be able to do this with you.
Yes. So let me tell you exactly why she's here and why, like, when I met her, I was like, we need to do a podcast together. So basically, she is responsible for a mental fitness company that she launched recently. And honestly, I don't know you, but I want to know everything about mental fitness. But first, I also want to know your story. Like, I'm sure there's a story behind it.
Definitely, there's a story
Yeah,
behind it.
tell me about it.
Firstly, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I think this is really nice. I love our stories or even if it's a different story, the trajectory of pivoting from very different
I
careers
know.
in the past and then coming to doing what we're doing. And it's coming from such a place of purpose,
Yeah.
which is why I was super excited to do this with
Me
you.
too, honestly.
Story. So where do I begin? Okay, in a quick nutshell. So I am of Indian origin. I've been brought up largely in Muscat, Oman, and then for a couple of years in Dubai. And I'm an engineer by trade. I've been working in oil and gas and primarily leading tech
Wow.
development or product development roles most of my career.
Tech girl.
Tech girl, yes, absolutely. And a very proud one, I should say. And, in just doing what I was doing, I think from a cultural standpoint, from an probably like a family of like the family that I was brought up in and like expectations from, say, what people defined as success and all of that. I think I was really following the framework really well. And it felt to me like I was breaking a lot of barriers being in a male dominated industry, in a very, male dominant career as well. And then suddenly in 2019, I got diagnosed with a burnout or a potential burnout because I was told if I did go into burnout category, then I would land up being chronically stressed.
Okay.
And the thing was that at that point, I found it interesting because I was like, burnouts are a real thing. Like, I had no idea that that's a real diagnosis. I just thought it's a way of, glamorized way of saying,
Yeah.
I'm really tired.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had a moment where I felt, how did I get here? Because it's not that I didn't see emotional or behavioral changes, but I think it was interesting for me that following and ticking off all the boxes, trying really hard to balance all the roles that you're generally handed down in order to feel like you are doing well in life.
Yeah.
I just didn't get, what else could I have done or what more could I have done? It just felt like a moment of a personal failure because I didn't understand how I got there. And because the doctor said that if you continued in the way that you're operating based off my results, that I would be chronically stressed. I think I needed someone of that profession to say that to me, to say I need to do something about it.
Yeah.
And in the moment, I think I was basically in a stage or in a role in my organization that was something I really hustled really hard to get to. And in that moment, I was making a decision to take a sabbatical, to choose some time in the grand scheme of life to say I want to get to know myself. I want to get to know how I got here. It was very scary. It was extremely nerve-wracking. I also felt I don't know what message I'm going to pass to people around. I was also really afraid of judgment. I was afraid that all the doors that I opened, like people would be like, yeah, that's you get there and that's what you do,
Yeah.
you quit.
Yeah. I
And I
understand.
wasn't really quitting. I just basically felt disconnected from everything. And it was during the sabbatical that, I think I came into the awareness of I don't really know who I am without my job title and my pay packet. I felt like my whole worth was associated with something outside of
Your
me.
identity, you
Yeah.
mean? Yeah.
And I felt that, that is one of the things you do in life, right? It can't be the only thing. And I think when I extrapolated life, like I'm 50, 60, 70, it just felt scary to think that if I disassociated from this career path, I think I really don't have a clue what is my
Yeah.
worth. And that felt really strange because to the outside world, how they look at you and what dialogue I was having on the inside was so
I can
contradictory that
imagine. I can
it
imagine.
was very scary. It was also very dark. I felt like that's probably the darkest I'd ever felt with
Yeah.
myself. And so I decided to, term the sabbatical as Project Suchi because I've basically developed products all my life. So I'm like, I'm going to look at myself as a personal brand, as a product in itself. And I wanted to spend the whole sabbatical period and really wanting to get to know me, but very tactically.
Yeah.
Like I wanted every approach that I would try to be on my calendar, to be scheduled for me. And then fast forward, I think 10 or 11 months of that discipline and just being consistent, like just showing up every day, even if it was 1 minute or 1 hour, or some days I would be immersed, it would be like 5 hours of doing different things. I just reached a place where I started to feel very zen, and it was very unlike my nature. Like I
Yeah.
like to know what I'm doing next. I like to control stuff. I like to
Yeah.
overthink the shit.
Yeah.
Sorry, but out of everything. So I was like, how come, I don't really know what my next steps
Yeah.
are. I'm just being in this moment, and I was feeling this sensation of just being peaceful. And so I think I looked back and I realized that I guess success is everything that the frameworks have defined. It is the outer hustle, but it has to be in tandem with the inner hustle of getting to know you, because otherwise, I think you're attaining that monetary levels of success or building that material or outer world of success, but you're getting empty in like an
Yeah.
emotional bank account, like in
Yeah.
within.
Yeah.
And I found that when I looked back, that those 10, 11 months, the real thing was showing up every day.
Yeah.
It was the consistency, it was that discipline, not how long, but that you showed up and
Of
that you
course.
built that repetitive muscle, right? Like I'm putting it in my calendar and I show up every day, no matter how long it is. And that to me is why I came up with this idea that this is not a mental health, this is a mental fitness
I
lifestyle.
love that. I really
And
love that. But
that's it.
can I actually ask you, how did you realize that you were having a burnout? Which was the first sign for those that maybe they're experiencing burnout,
Yeah.
or maybe they think, am I actually having a burnout? So I really want to know which were the first sign that you realized you were going through a burnout.
No, so anything I say to you now is just in reflection, but I will have to be honest that I did not really pay attention to any of the signs.
Yeah.
It's just now, if I throw them out to you, I'll just tell you the things that were happening to me. Like, for example, I felt like no matter how much I rested, I was just exhausted all the time. Like, it was this, like an energy drain. Like, you
Yeah.
just don't have the energy to do anything. But it's not like I've really done anything that needs me to go to that place. And what I was doing to counter that was I was overworking, because
Yeah.
I think culturally, and also because I was never self-aware, I was really never practicing anything to reflect. I kind of looked at that culture as very woo-woo, and
Yeah.
it seemed, I don't say it anymore, but I used to be very logic driven only. And I think it felt like I don't understand why these things would work. Or,
Yeah.
it's like someone has lost the plot of life, and that's why they give up
Yeah.
on everything, go off to Bali, and then they wear these cotton robes. And so I really ran
Yeah.
away from those narratives.
Yeah.
In fact, like I would go to yoga studios and, really go to just burn calories. And then before Shavasana, I'm out, because
Yeah.
who has time for Shavasana, right?
Wow.
Like that was me.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Very, very switched off, if I may.
Yeah.
And so I basically would feel that I don't have time to pay attention to this discomfort of fatigue. And my inner voice would say, like, "Oh, isn't this what you wanted in life? Like, what are you tired now?"
Yeah.
Or like, what do you have to be tired of? Like, look at those people on the road who are doing
Yeah.
that. Or like someone else who's hustling 10 times harder.
Yeah.
Or in my mind,
Yeah.
I'm putting a perspective that they are.
Yes.
And so I would talk myself down out of it. And I was, at that point doing a role where I was managing teams between KL, India, and all the way South America and Houston.
Wow.
So I could do like a 6 a.m. to a 1 a.m.
Wow, with the time difference.
to just numb it, right? Like I could stay super busy so that I didn't have to pay attention to the fact that I just feel exhausted all the time. And then it was starting to show in very interesting ways. Like in the morning, I would always have green tea, like at the start of my day, but it had caffeine.
Yeah.
And after a while, I would notice that like I get up and get out of my office and I get dizzy.
Yeah.
Like I feel lightheaded, like I'm going to kind of faint.
Yeah.
And I just decided, oh, maybe green tea doesn't work for me anymore.
Yeah.
Again, dismiss. And then it got really more complicated. I am a people person. Like I would say I'm an ambivert. I like alone time, but I love being with people. I feel like that exchange of energy gives me life.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to meet anyone.
You didn't have the social capacity for it.
At all. And I felt that, your mind knows in a way who you are or what you like in general. And I found that I didn't understand what was going on. And I would make excuses last minute. And I was also doing a role at work where we had to build teams for a very interesting space in AI for us within our own organization. So I had to go to a lot of recruitment fairs at universities, which is a lot of fun. You're pitching to young kids, like, why you need to come and join us. And it was a very new field of recruiting data scientists. And I just used to have to wear this like bulletproof vest to get up, get ready and go. And when I would come back home, I would pass out like I've been in 50-degree heat or something like that. And again, I just sort of felt the desire to hide it, to kind of lie about it, to kind of not share it.
Yeah.
But when it started to get really difficult was after those, emotional symptoms, I started to have physical symptoms. Then it was like my eye would constantly like secrete, like say fluid in the night.
No way.
And in the morning when I wake up, my eyelids would be like sealed.
Yeah.
I would need warm water to open them up.
Yeah.
Then I always worked out, like I always took care of myself, but then I would suddenly have like a lower back pain or like a constant cold or flu or a headache, like things to constantly say like, I don't feel good.
Yeah.
And I think the physical illnesses, that's when I was like, oh, I'm not well. I need to go to the doctor. But until then, I think, all of these emotional behavioral changes were more not feeling like myself and starting to slowly feel disconnected from all the values that mattered to me. From, I loved being in oil and gas and I loved doing what I was doing. And suddenly I started asking things like, what is the point of this? Or, what are we going to achieve by doing this? So it felt like I was becoming alienated within myself.
Yeah.
And then I think until it manifested physically, I didn't want to take attention or pay attention.
Yeah.
And when it did, then even when I shared it with people close to me, the response would be like, you're just working too much or you're too tired or like take a break or like go on vacation.
Yeah.
But none of that fixed it. So I think it was really the physical illnesses that eventually got me to go and get myself checked.
Yeah.
But that's what I would say. All of these were the symptoms. And even after when I went to the doctor, by the way, I did a full body assessment and nothing, like no parameters were off the grid.
Yeah.
And nothing was even like in a red zone or anything like that. So I really had to confide in that moment that for the first time I like opened up and I said, I don't feel like myself.
Yeah.
And it was the hormone panel check that helped me identify that, okay, cortisol is the hero ingredient. And it kind of showed where I was hanging out.
Yeah.
I think in general being in a fight or flight zone. But this is really how it all panned out. I really didn't respect how I was feeling. I felt the desire to respect my physical health, but not my emotional well-being.
Yeah.
And I had these fantastic voices in my head that talked me down a lot, like shaming me for feeling tired or shaming me for, canceling on people or shaming me for getting to a place in my career and, I don't want to work 10 times harder and I'm feeling like I can't even get up. And so I kind of did a double take on it. And I think it made everything worse.
Yeah. Interesting because I actually went through the same. The moment before I sold my first startup, the startup that I built with my co-founder.
Yes.
And actually I was overloaded with work. And the worst thing is that I felt very entitled to I'm the one working, like as if I'm going to war and I need to show people that I'm like the one that is working more than the others. And I was like, this attitude, first of all, is so masculine.
Absolutely.
And second, I mean, I'm not going to get an award when I'm dying for the amount of hours that I spend working. So it's good to hustle. But I came to a point where I was so disconnected and I was so burnt out that one time I went to the gym and then at some point I start to, like, my vision started to blurry completely. I couldn't see anything. So I called my best friend. I was like, I have a problem. I can't see anything.
Yeah.
So she was like, okay, just sit down, have water, etc. And then the doctor came and he did blood tests, etc. And then I was like, okay, but maybe I have, maybe I have something, and I'm a health coach myself. So it was so curious that I was like coaching people all the time, but then when it comes to yourself, you're so critical.
Exactly.
And he looked at me and he was like, I think you're burnout because you don't have anything. I remember he told me, I think you're extremely exhausted. And since then, I completely changed my routine, my life. But I'm so happy that you're bringing this topic up because sometimes, especially us women, we feel that we need to show up and we need to show people that we can do it. And even because it's never enough, but when it's actually enough. Yeah.
And I think, I think the thing that I realized several years into working on myself is that external hustle is very important because I think we're all, we need to be in the pursuit of something that drives you, right? I think if you're, if you practice, like I see that today with, maybe Gen Z, and a lot of what we see in Instagram is constantly like canceling hustle culture or asking us to like, spend more time giving permission to be in a slow era or like give yourself permission to rest and stuff. And I love it. I love that we're including the things that need to help you make sure you're feeling well whilst you're doing what you have to do.
Absolutely. It's an integration at the
end.
end.
It is. But what I realize is that if you, just like you're overworking, if you are underworking, your mind is going to go into a different kind of fatigue, which is another kind of burnout, right? Because you have nothing to drive yourself towards. So I realized that hustle is really important, but how we have, when you're unaware or how you're wired is you are suffering for the win. Like you're hustling at the cost of your well-being.
True.
And now I recognize it as the hustle is really essential, but you're hustling whilst being mindful that how am I feeling?
Yeah.
Because if I do want to hustle and I want to be 10 times on turbo more productive, then giving yourself rest helps that process. Boosting yourself with dopamine helps it. Getting your body to move helps that. So these things have become enablers. And so if I listen to myself and I see how I'm feeling, I can actually enhance how I'm performing towards that hustle, right?
Yeah.
That's where I found that the significant difference is that you're hustling whilst you're making sure you're always thriving.
True.
That's the difference. You know, I feel like you don't really skip out on the hustle, but you cancel that culture that says you gotta hustle till you die, or you gotta hustle till you're broken, or that doesn't make sense because then what are you doing all this for?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I have a question for you. Do you really think that because we were talking and you were mentioning about cultural dynamics, which we all have, by the way, different cultures, but the dynamic can be sometimes similar, sometimes very tough.
Yes.
Do you think they played a major role for you?
110%, yeah, for sure. I think it's such a big part of your autopilot, right? Like how I behave until I really started to look at my own mental schema and be like, why do I speak like this to myself? Or where is that belief coming from? Or why do I get angry about someone saying something in a particular context? I think until then, you're really running a pre-program, and a large part of that conscious pre-program is my upbringing. It's what I've heard my mom say or my dad say, or their exchanges, or what, even if I went to like 6 degrees of separation from my parents, a large part of like the friends and family that they created around us as an ecosystem all kind of thought the same, right? It was like, there's a particular path in how you're achieving in life, and you're being, in my case, it's like you have to be an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant. And my dad would be like, anything other than that is shameful, or it's like you're a freaking failure.
Yeah.
And so there was that constant pride inside me that if I'm doing really well at school, I'm topping in mathematics or whatever, physics and science, like I felt that making them proud was my success story, right? But there was never a moment to ask myself that, what is exciting me the most, or
Yeah.
what am I loving, or like to even sit down and have a conversation that right now I feel really tired, like I just want to take a break. And
Yeah.
that conversation to check in was never there.
Yeah.
And the conversation to please was always there because a lot of these parameters were set up. They were already pre-set up. And, I grew up in a house where my parents were, I think, quite progressive in their own ways of bringing up my sister and me. But my dad's family, for example, they shamed my parents a lot for having two daughters and no sons. And so there was a lot of aggression in me because I would see my parents go through that struggle of
Yeah.
wanting to educate my sister and me, wanting to give us as much opportunity to be able to build a life that felt like my kids can be whatever they want.
Yes.
And at the same time, you're super nervous that nobody should get this permission to say, yeah, you have daughters. Like, what did you expect? Like, what else is going to happen with them, right? So
Yeah.
I took it as a mission of my own, very young, watching that, I'm going to basically do whatever it takes to show that I am like a man. Like,
Yeah.
I am basically capable like a boy
Yeah.
or a man is.
Yeah.
And then now, when you do all the inner work, I look at all my choices. Like, I went to engineering school, I went to oil and gas, I've been in tech. Like, I've made a lot of masculine choices, probably because it came from my subconscious space.
Interesting.
So culture for sure has been a very big part of, how my autopilot program
Yeah.
was running.
Yeah.
And even to now look and kind of keep the things that I love and shed the things that I don't, is a lot of it I find is
Absolutely.
culturally driven. For sure.
Absolutely. That's very interesting. And I had the feeling that actually there was a subconscious, let's say, push from this.
sure.
That's why I asked you.
Yeah, definitely.
But how did you start to rebuild yourself, and how did you get into this amazing concept of mental fitness?
So, the rebuilding, to be super honest, the only trigger or I think the point that finally got me to, I don't know, I would say it was like a light bulb moment, was a very dark but alarming moment, was to hear somebody who is professionally certified, is, a doctor and
Yeah.
is in, an expert in their capacity, to say to me that based on, your cortisol levels that they measured over 48 hours, that you're kind of operating in fight or flight. And when you continue that way, then your mind is going to go into chronic stress, where it thinks that, if you ask me, do you want water, coffee, or tea, I'm going to feel that it's too much to deal with.
Yeah.
Because I've gone into this brain fatigue, decision fatigue stage, where I think the mind can't operate, or your nervous system cannot operate from a grounded space.
Yeah.
And I was told that at that point, you need a different kind of help, like not just coping tools that allow you to ground you, but you also need maybe a psychiatry, you need like medication.
Yeah.
And that was where I really kind of felt that that's not what I'm doing all this for. And in the big picture, I don't want to look back and think that, I was ticking all the boxes and doing everything that I thought was indicating that I'm successful and
Yeah.
I'm doing really well, to be freaking chronically
Yeah.
stressed. That's not what I want. So at that point, I think taking that decision to take a sabbatical to really get to know me and like understand who the freak am I, and
Yeah.
like how did I get here, was honestly how it began. But to answer your question in a deeper way, I really didn't know what I was supposed to do. I just took that decision. I thought it was one of the bravest, the first decision I made where I didn't consult more than 2-3 people.
You just trust your gut.
And I've never really trusted just my gut. I've been
Yeah.
a very logical person. So which means, you have a few like mentors or people you love, and you kind of run it through them. You validate your decision. Maybe I even got my gut to be kind of dormant.
Yeah.
Because I've been getting it like, oh, what is my dad saying? What's my partner saying? Like, I want to ask it of people that I find inspiring or I want to respect. But I was never really asking me, what are you thinking? Like, Suchi, what do you feel?
Yeah.
And so that muscle, I think, was really like non-existent. Or it existed, but non-functional.
Yeah,
if
not
I may.
functioning. Yeah.
And so this was one of those first decisions, and I didn't want to hear anybody's anything, because I realized what I felt no one could understand that. Like that feeling was very scary for me. It felt like everything that I've done up to this point is what I was kind of running or rooting for. And it feels I'm disconnected from that.
Yeah.
And where am I going with this? So you're like in a no man's land or no woman's land or a
Yeah.
no human's land. It felt very scary because I didn't feel like I belonged, and I felt very like alone, very isolated in the way my mental construct was. And you kind of don't want to share that with people, right?
Yeah.
You feel like, have I lost it? Like, have I lost
Yeah.
the plot in life? Like, what's going on? And then to answer your second part, I think once I like got into the acceptance that I am on the sabbatical, I think a month later is when I realized, like, whenever I would go out and introduce myself at any social gathering or anywhere, I had this desire to say, yeah, I'm on a sabbatical, but I'm an engineer working in oil and gas, and I lead this R&D team that does advanced analytics. And I found it interesting that I always needed to tell the person what I am doing, that I'm on a sabbatical. That's when it hit me that I don't actually know who I am without a job title. So that fear drove me to say, I'm taking out my Outlook calendar. It's just that my calendar is going to be full of things that are to explore me. It's going to be meetings on top of meetings with me. And, at max another person, like a coach or a therapist or my personal trainer or a friend. But everything is going to be purposeful. And I started to notice that, when I initially set it up, I myself found it funny. Like, I have a calendar meeting with me to go catch the sunrise, take a walk, go to the same coffee shop and read the paper. So I would get up and I'd be like, I have no team, no agenda, no goals, no nothing, just go back to sleep, Suchi. And after like 4 or 5 times of canceling, I had this perspective flip, where I asked myself that if I was meeting Vicky today, I wouldn't cancel unless I'm sick or something.
Yeah.
So how come, I wake up every morning and I made a decision, but I'm just very comfortable, cancel, because I'm not really accountable to anyone else. So then I asked myself, so you don't want to be accountable to you?
Yeah.
What is the wiring that I'm sending myself again and again? And I realized that self-worth is built within, not by what people tell you. That's a bonus. But it first comes from inside, and that comes with me repeating that promise to myself, right? Like, yeah, you're going to keep your word, girl. Like, you are. But that word is me to me.
Yeah.
Not me to just you, because that's completely like superficial.
Yeah.
So then I started to honor the commitment, and I told myself that, even if I wake up at 5 for that morning meeting, but I can walk only 10 minutes, it's okay. But I show up, and I go and kind of offer myself to see what it meant for me to commit to that meeting.
Yeah.
And that consistency and discipline, the way it started to take me from this really like fogged, like completely lost, feeling empty, feeling very isolated, to a space of like, I don't know, deep connection, understanding myself, this love affair with me, and then accepting or seeing even the things that are not nice about myself and wanting to process them, wanting to hold them, wanting to, like in the calendar, I would have every day in the beginning, because it was really dark, like 2 hours to worry. Because I found that when I didn't schedule it, I would just worry all day, and then the day is over.
No way. You schedule worrying in the calendar?
Yeah.
No way.
So I found that when I started to give myself permission to worry for 2 hours every day, it started to feel like in those 2 hours, I actually have the right to go to the darkest places in my mind. But after the 2 hours, I knew that if I didn't have something to physically move, I would spiral the whole day,
Wow.
right? So I set up a a resistance training class with my personal trainer or coach an hour later. So after 2 hours, you shut down, you get ready, you got to go to the gym.
That's amazing, actually. That's a very good idea.
So you're releasing that, fear that is within, which is also you. It's a real emotion. And, in this whole toxic positivity culture, you're told that, be grateful for what you have. Like, this is you're sad about this, but why are you complaining? Why are you saying it? But those emotions are real.
Yeah.
I think wallowing in them is not healthy, but acknowledging them and understanding where they're coming from and to give it a little bit of time to process is necessary to really level up, to really be able to say that I'm kind of holding space for the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And so I think all of those, practices of eventually acknowledging all of me and kind of seeing me
Yeah.
probably in just its raw fashion of
Yeah.
suchi. I think that consistency by the end of 10 months or so, it brought me to a place that was so fascinating. And I felt that it's like, like you're walking by a park of like different flowers or
Yeah.
leaves. And I've probably walked by for like 10 years and
Yeah.
never really seen them. And
Yeah.
now I'm suddenly like starting to see the texture, the color, the wind on the leaves. And
Yeah.
that I felt was like a different kind of feeling alive. And that's why I looked back and I was like, what exactly has happened? And I realized that this is a mental fitness journey.
Yeah.
And it's a place where you're committing to yourself in order to say, just like I understand how important my career is, I understand monetary goals, I understand getting a partner that I love, I understand, family and all of that, you also want to build that discipline with your mind.
Yeah.
And I felt that on a superficial or a deeper level, we all understand that discipline with our bodies.
Yeah.
Like whether it's aesthetics and mindset as a lifestyle, I know why I take care of my body. So that analogy for me was like, if I knew that I have to take care and show up for my mind like that, it's an empowering space to be in order to show up for your mind, as opposed
Yeah.
to mental health, which is you show up when shit hits the fan.
Yeah,
Not
true.
because it's an integral part of your, or like almost a core of your
Yeah.
well-being. I mean, it's mind and gut that's like
Yeah.
basically the core of your existence and your
True.
decision making, your feeling, all of it, right? So I felt that this should be a mental fitness journey. And eventually, I want the brand to be a mental fitness lifestyle company where, like you don't question why you're brushing your teeth in the morning, right?
Yeah.
You know why it is and you know what the purpose is. So I would like that, you come to this place that we're building to look at it as your daily toothbrush.
Yes.
It's just a lifestyle that
Yes.
you just don't question it. You know why you're doing it.
Yeah.
It's like your car goes for maintenance, your teeth goes for cleaning, you want to like take care of yourself externally. You go to
Yeah.
work out because you want to keep your body moving, agile. The mind is the same. It's exactly
Yeah.
the same, and probably the most important
Yeah.
relationship you have with
Yeah.
yourself.
100%.
So
And actually, now I wanted to ask you how, because for sure you took inspiration from the calendar that you made for yourself in order to show up for yourself every day.
yes.
And just as we're going to the gym and we schedule a Pilates class, you schedule a moment to just let your mind take a break,
Totally, yes.
So, how did you translate this experience into a new business?
So, I have been, like I told you, in tech my whole life, and I've done a lot of product development. So, I decided to take what I'm really good at and what I've built a career with who I'm becoming. And I
Yeah.
felt like a marriage of both is what I'm going to build. So, what I decided is, being an engineer, I'm very tactical.
Yeah.
And what I found is also being a non-believer, I think coming into this space, I recognize for myself that having a structure, having a sense of discipline, having visibility on what it is that I'm trying to do. Like, if the big picture is to get to know me, to break it down, like, how am I going to get to know me?
Yeah.
What am I going to do? Then level 1, level 2, level 3, those things came from my past life. And so I took those elements and then I decided that I'm basically taking like external engineering, but I'm building an inner engineering brand.
Oh.
And so that's how I basically merged my past world to who I'm becoming. And I felt that's where I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And my first, idea was to build an app, because I wanted to build an app where I wanted to gamify the experience of getting to know you.
Yeah.
And it's just, in product development, we practice something called agile methodology. And it's like you build a minimum viable product so you can throw it out into the world and see
Yeah.
how people respond. If your jargon is making sense, are you meeting people where they're at? And so I kind of wanted to take a few steps back and say, I'll start with level 1.
Yeah.
And let's see how people are receiving it. Like, mental fitness as a concept is disruptive. To be tactical around getting to know you is disruptive.
Yeah.
To say, it's not about how long, but just a minute a day is disruptive. So
Yeah.
I wanted to bring in all of these concepts in a stage 1, if I may. And then the eventual roadmap would be to get to a place where we can scale, where we build this super fun, platform or a tech space or an app where you can really look at getting to know you as a lifestyle.
Oh my God, I love that. I can't wait actually
I
to
can't wait
put
for you
my
to hear
hands
about
on
it.
it.
Totally. Yes.
Yes, yes.
But you should even check out our first product. It kind of, like with MVP or minimum viable products, what they say is, your end goal should be achieved in a very simplistic way. Like
Yeah.
if I give you like an example, it's like, say, you have the vision or the goal is I have to reach from point A to B. And let's say the grand picture is I want a Ferrari engine
Yeah.
built around this super good looking aesthetics to go
Yeah.
from A to B. But the MVP one is just a scooter.
Yeah.
It also takes me from A to B,
Yeah.
right? Like the
Yeah.
purpose is the same and what you're achieving is the same. You're just going to keep leveling up with MVP. So the first product is really very much doing that, able to look at your existing schema, hand holding you like a
Yeah.
coach without a coach. Very tactical, very, very, like, I would say, strategic in how you go one step after another, and kind of getting to see you and
Yeah.
learn about you in the process. But it's just, I just want it to get more and more interesting as we go to the next, like, product development of the next round,
Of course,
But
of
this
course.
is where we're
So
at now.
by now you launch one product.
Yes, our
So
first.
tell me a little bit more about it because you already introduced it a little bit, but I want to go deeper.
Sure. So our first product, I called it Making the Invisible Visible. And it's basically, it's a book, So a part of it is a guide that's really hand-holding you on looking at your mental schema, like just looking at everything that goes on in your head in your silent moments,
Yes.
right? It's like, even when we're here, like suddenly, let's say you're thinking about like, okay, how much longer do I have? And like,
Yeah.
am I looking, is my angle right? Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of parallel thoughts that are going on, right? And they're all invisible to the external world. And I think we're so comfortable with those dialogues. Like it's just a part of who I am,
Yeah.
that you don't even notice how much weight they carry. Because if they're great dialogues, they're very much light and they kind of propel you to more.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is not nice dialogues. In order to get to where we get, I think we've used a lot of like judgmental dialogues in order
Yeah.
to get to where we do. And that was a very pivotal part of my inner work during the sabbatical, that I think as I got deeper and deeper, one of the, I would say the core moments that really like went aha for me was when I, met one of these coaches who introduced me to the concept of how you have these voices within that are basically saboteurs. Like they are built in to protect you, but over time they become
Auto-sabotage you.
yeah, they're here sabotaging you.
Yeah.
So for example, I used to be very proud and say all of my life that I'm a perfectionist and I'm an overthinker, and these terminologies felt that they're very naturally me. And then I realized during that that part of my journey that I'm a very unhealthy perfectionist. It's nice to be doing the best that you can, but if I have a voice that constantly criticizes or shames me that that's not good enough, or like read that email again, or like you finish that deck but run it through somebody else, or you know what, like make sure that whatever you've done there, you're not looking stupid, because then everybody's going to know you're stupid.
Yeah.
And that kind of deprecation to eventually get stuff done is hugely draining.
It is.
And it's like a weight that nobody can see. It's
Yeah.
just, and I'm also not aware, because I think this is me, right? I'm telling people I'm a perfectionist. I think it's just a part of who I am. But during that phase in my sabbatical, when I was working on the voices, I started very simple, because I also voiced that I am coming from a very non-believing space, so I want to understand the science behind everything that I'm trying.
Yeah.
So it was like, just create visibility on the voices within. So I
Yeah.
had like this tiny, like my notepad on my phone, like a
Yeah.
page open for that. I would just put a date, and every day when I'm walking around, I hear a voice, I'd put a line. Walk around and I hear something else, like, of course you have to tell them that you're doing this in
Yes.
the past, because otherwise they're going to be like, I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
A line. So I started noticing the volume of how often I have this voice.
Auto-sabotage voices in your head.
Exactly. And then I also noticed that somehow, the volume of how often they talk, it's like I'm having a roommate in my head who's
Yeah.
not paying rent.
Yeah.
So that's how it felt, like I didn't really invite you. And
Yeah.
then I got very deep into the science of how that happens, and it happens to everybody. It doesn't matter you're,
Absolutely.
I don't know, Donald Trump or us or anyone else. It's like you have these inner
Yeah.
voices. And I kind of went to a school by a professor who wrote a book on positive intelligence, and he really broke it down on where these sabotaging voices come from, how everybody builds them in their childhood. And in that space, I went to a place where I started to name the voice. So I tend to worry a lot. So I call that voice Lana Del Rey because I love her music. But every time I listen to her songs, I'm always like in a very pensive mood. Like I feel like I go to a place where I'm like really thinking and I'm kind of like reflecting or whatever. So I'm like, I'm just going to call it Lana Del Rey. And every time it shows up, I'm going to be like, Lana, not right now. Like I got to do this stuff. I can't talk right now, but I hear you. And it started to make it lighter.
Yeah.
And then I think I created distance between the voice and me to know that that is not me. It's just a coping mechanism I've created from a very young age.
Yeah.
For me to be maybe not a failure in society or not,
Yeah.
be called like you messed up or things like that, because maybe that's the kid that I needed to be for my parents.
Yeah.
I had to be perfect in order to say,
Yeah.
having a girl is fantastic. So
Yeah.
maybe I was really building that coping mechanism to never have a moment to let them down.
Yeah.
But in the process, I'm constantly never giving myself the opportunity to fail or to fall off or to be a child even.
Yeah.
So that process of dissecting and naming and separating and seeing the volume of how often, I think by the end of, practicing that like a daily thing that I did by default as a habit without loading myself with the heaviness of it, just pay attention to when it is, then name it, then start separating it, then recognize it's not you. That step by step, I started to feel so light. It's like I took all these bags inside of me and I'm like, yo, not right now. Not. I don't want to listen to you. You're not telling me the truth of what I feel towards myself. So then if I now feel like we need to sit down and have this conversation, I want to do the best that I can, but I also want to acknowledge that I did the best that I can. I don't want to shame myself anymore that, you went there and you just couldn't say this or you couldn't speak that or you forgot to say that. So I feel
just punish yourself in a way.
That makes it a lot lighter for you. You're walking around with a lot of clarity. You're walking around with a lot of lightness. So this product is all about making that invisible set of voices.
Is it like guide or app?
So no, this version is digital. We're coming up with a physical as well, but
Amazing.
It's basically 6 chapters that guide you very tactically to get there. And then there's, a few interesting chapters because I believe that, working on what is not good that's within you in your head space or in your mental schema, but also building the neural pathways on what is good. That, what do I have right now? What am I grateful for? Or, doing activities like action, putting yourself in action that releases like a dopamine or oxytocin or serotonin or endorphins. Both complementing is necessary to really level up.
Yeah.
So the other sections of the book are really about, I call the chapter like a dose of the dose, like a dose of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. So they're all very tiny activities that you can just do one a day and you release one of them in your hippocampus. And so your brain is operating from a more productive state by habit.
Yeah.
And you're also looking at what is not serving you and trying to understand where it's coming from, naming it, distancing it.
Yeah.
And then because I really like understanding the science behind everything, I introduced a concept of 10,000 steps for the mind, so you understand your mental schema, then you build your positive neural pathways as well. And then you start to build it as a fitness lifestyle, where you're really knowing what it is to walk a couple of steps for my mind, which is nothing but being present.
Yeah.
It's just an interesting way to measure myself being present. And I think the more you can increase the quotient of being in the now, the higher the proportion of you feeling peace.
Yeah.
So you're being successful on the outside, but you're also building that insane amount of peace on the within, and that's that rare sweet
That's a
spot.
real success.
That's
actually.
a real success.
Yes,
Exactly.
I love that.
And after you kind of go through all of these concepts, we have 12 weeks of journaling. So because I do believe that knowledge is aplenty these days, this is obviously curated in a very nice way for you to really look at your headspace today.
Yeah.
But then if you're not putting pen to paper or like, writing it out or like putting yourself in action or movement, I feel like you don't know how to embody that. You don't become it.
Yeah.
So the 12 weeks is really looking at, how you say 21 to 90 days to bring change. I feel like the optimal amount is 66 days because we all fall off.
Yeah.
Where, a new habit is exciting in the beginning, then you procrastinate. So
Yeah.
you give yourself those buffers, but you want to be disciplined.
Yeah.
So 66 days is an optimal, and here this
Yeah.
is a 12-week journaling experience to
Yeah.
really bring that change in you.
Yeah, I love that you actually give enough like space for people
Yes.
to not only explore what they can potentially write down, but also to build the actual habits.
Absolutely. And I kind of constantly say through the book, because that's what worked for me, that it's not about you doing all of these things or like finishing everything in the journaling space every day. It's about showing up. So
Yeah.
the fact that you prioritize, I want to even answer one of them every day. I want to spend 60 seconds on something every day
Yeah.
is enough commitment, because I feel when consistency is compounded, that's what creates an iconic
Absolutely.
existence, right? Like you look at yourself 365 days later, that's 365 minutes with you where you really went
Yeah.
within and checked in with yourself.
Yeah.
That makes you a person that you can't unknow the things you got to know
Yeah.
in that 1
Yeah.
minute over 365 days.
Now I have one last question for you, because to be honest with you guys, I will continue for hours because I feel that there's more coming, but I'm
Absolutely.
sure we're gonna have another episode together.
I feel it too.
Yes, because we're like very good certified yappers, both of us.
Absolutely.
But I have one final question for you.
Yes.
I really want to know what's on your calendar right now
Do you mean like
in terms of mental fitness for you. What's your daily routine?
So in
What do
terms
you
of-
integrate?
In terms of mental fitness, I have 3 things that are non-negotiable for me. The
Yeah.
calendar can get richer at times. I tend to add things over the weekend and
Yeah.
stuff, but I have to have my guided meditation in the morning. Like whatever happens, I need like that 15
The moment
minutes.
you wake up or later?
So I wake up and then I usually turn on the kettle, like to
Yeah.
warm some water. I like that noise.
Yes.
I feel it's like white noise or whatever. So it kind of makes me feel like I'm looking out into, let's say, a sunrise, or I'm
Yeah.
looking out into
Yeah.
into just like,
Yeah.
sky and nature. And then I hear the noise, and then once I feel like I got my mug of like hot water, lemon, whatever I want in it, like turmeric and
Yeah.
all the good stuff, then I just sit down, and I still, even though I've been practicing the discipline for so long, I still don't do well without a guide in
Yeah.
the meditative
A voice, you
I
mean.
need a voice.
Yeah.
So then I have to do that. I have to do it even if I feel I want to shorten it. Like I could do 5 minutes to 15, to sometimes I sit down for an hour if it's a day off or I'm on vacation or
Yeah.
things like that. The second is journaling. And it's very interesting that I have fallen in love with the experience over the last 7-8 years, and I never ever journaled before that. Like I don't think I even understood the concept.
Yeah.
But why I've really fallen in love with it over the years is that I feel there's a lot your mind can hold, but when you write it down, it's like a big cobweb or
Yeah.
a mishmash, and it starts to detangle.
Yeah.
And over a period of time, you see a lot of repeating themes, themes on
Yeah.
where you're stuck, or where you're always coming back to, or what is actually working well for you, or what makes you happy. Like you get to observe a lot of things about you, and I feel it's like your own personal AI.
Yeah.
You get to understand yourself by data, but
Yeah.
by repetition and data.
Yeah, you can find the patterns.
Exactly. And so I can only do that when I visualize it, right? That's why the journal or the book is called Making the Invisible Visible. Like you need to see you
Yeah.
in order to start leveling up. So that's why I even call the space of mental fitness, it's just you versus you.
Yeah.
You're not really comparing yourself with anyone else. You are really like a video game, you're leveling up,
Yeah.
but it's you leveling up one after the other.
Yeah.
And my third non-negotiable is working out. I feel that
You work
moving-
out every day?
I do some form of movement every day.
Okay.
Like 3 days I go to do resistance training with a trainer, but the other days I'll do Pilates, or I'll go for a run, or
Yeah.
I'll walk like 15,000 steps. And I have a puppy, so I walk like 4 times a day
Amazing.
by default. But I find that moving my body can, help me in ways that I can't really. It's not just what I verbalize, but it's also what I feel internally.
Yeah.
I feel like it grounds me. Sometimes it helps me disconnect from difficult emotions. If I'm feeling angry about a situation, it's a great way to kind of calm down
Isolate,
the
yeah.
anger and then look at the same problem or conflict or struggle with a very like, what
Yeah.
is it doing for me, or how
Yeah.
is this serving me sort of an attitude.
Yeah.
So I find movement has the ability to bring you back to the present really well. And in the day, though, like this is something that I put as pockets of peace or coming back to the now in my calendar, which is just 10 seconds, but 10 seconds on many different moments in the day. And this is just a grounding technique. It's like you look at the minute you feel you're overwhelmed or there's too much happening, or it's a very like big presentation, so I feel nervous, or
Yeah.
I'm pitching to somebody, things like that. I just do this quick thing of 5 things I can see around me, 4 things that I can touch, 3 things that I can smell, or 2 things that I can feel, and
You
one
just
thing that I
revive
can
your
taste.
senses.
So it's all the 5, but you do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you really pay attention to what are the 5 things I can see here, what are the 4 things I can hear,
Interesting.
what are the 3 things that I can touch, the 2 things I can feel, or a smell, or the one thing I
Yeah.
can taste. And that I feel suddenly just disrupts where you're at, and you come back to the present, and you just do them like 10 seconds several times in the day. And
Yeah.
it's a really great way to just bring you right here, like so even anxiety, even feeling overwhelmed, overstressed is a great hack,
Yeah.
by the way. But that's something that I do by default. So this is what I would say
Amazing.
my
Amazing.
calendar has.
How can people find you?
So our community page or our brand page is called Join Inside and Out. You can find us on Instagram. Our product, our website, all of it is listed right out there. And I think other than that, it would probably be in great sources where we share like podcast episodes or everything else that we're doing. But I think our one-stop shop place right now would be Instagram, where our community is growing and it's more and more people who are wanting to choose to check in with themselves before they check in with the world.
I love it.
I love
I
that
love
too.
it. Thank you, Suchi, for being here. It was such a lovely conversation. And I'm sure you guys and girls can be so inspired from, especially girlsy, I would
Yeah.
say, because your story is actually so inspiring for also like girls that maybe they're out there and they're hustling, or maybe they want to start a new business.
Yeah.
So I feel that actually this story can be really inspiring for all the listeners. So thank you so much for being here. I'm sure we're going to have a second round
I think
very
so.
soon.
I'm very sure already.
Yeah. And thank you so much for listening. And I'll see you on the next episode.